What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 107, a regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. My name's Meowth, and as usual, I'm joined by my two good friends and co-host Roffle and Corbett. Guys, we took a week off, but it's good to see you again. How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, I'm doing good. We had a little bit of slow news week last week, so decided to take it off. I feel well rested, and we actually have some news this week, so we can chat about that and have a topic to go over, and some rather exciting new things coming.
Yeah, very excited to talk with you guys today. Feeling good. There's more coffee in my blood than blood. So I had to get an early start today, but feeling good and ready to talk everything with you guys.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the reactions that we have to some of these cards. So we had a balance patch come out literally yesterday. So we've not had a ton of time to play with things, but we're going to talk early impressions and kind of the fallout for a big balance patch to standard here. And so let's go ahead and start with first things first. There has been no changes to Big Priest or Quest Mage. Maybe dive into that a little bit, but we did get a big change to another kind of wild terror. Wildhart Guff getting nerfed. Has been kind of busted for a very long time, ever since his release. Finally got touched due to its power in standard. So he used to just, every time he gained mana, whether it was off his battle cry or off his hero power, used to give you a full mana crystal. It now gives you an empty mana crystal. And so I'll just read out the dev comments here as we move to the changes. So Ramp Druid is one of the most powerful and influential decks in the game this patch. So talking about standard, Guff was the clear power outlier for the deck, so a change to Guff was the highest confident change we could make. We still expect Guff to be a playable card with an important role in the strategies, but we hope that this change will make it feel like there's more of a cost to ramping than there was previously, and oh boy, is it felt. Guff is so much worse than it used to be, which is saying something because he's still really powerful, which tells you how powerful he was prior to the nerf. Still a good card, but I think Martian was talking about how it kind of cost him, like the nerf itself was costing him 4 or 5 mana crystals over the course of over the course of a game, which is very relevant, right, when you're talking about the speed of the WoW format. So pretty huge nerf here to Guff. What are y'all's impressions and first takes or hot takes?
Yeah, I played quite a bit of Reno Druid immediately just to see. I wanted to know how Guff was. And you definitely feel it on both ends, both the hero power and the battle cry is a big deal as well, because on 6 mana you can't hero power anymore, so that's -2 mana crystals that it really starts to set you back. And there are situations where on 6 mana it would be an autoplay Guff, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna play a Spreading Plague instead, and so it does slow you down quite a bit. And there are a lot of times where I was just like, I don't get the mana crystal this turn, so I might as well draw a card, which still drawing a card is very good, but I was leaning on the draw a lot more than I had in the past, just because of the way that the hero power lines up. For me personally, the hero power is a bit of a buff because I look a little less silly on stream when I forget to press the button when I have 1 mana floating, and so that's the good news for me personally. For everyone else that has a functional brain, it hurts. It's pretty hard. I think people are. This is another one of those we talked about this. What was the card last time? This is another one of those OG Quest Mage nerfs, or the alignment nerf, in fact, where people look at it kind of on face value and are like, this does nothing. Then you start playing with the card and you're like, oh, this does do something. In the case of this versus Celestial Alignment, though, Guff is still a very strong card because you can still get to 20 mana and do rather silly things in the late game. You still have Twig Sphere, you still have Floops Gloop into a Scale of Onyxia and Flipper Friends, so you still have near infinite mana anyway. So I don't know, Druid still has a lot of broken cards in the format. It's good that Guff got hit, definitely, but Druid is probably still going to be fine.
Yeah, I haven't had the chance to play with Guff, so I haven't really had the chance to play with much because, like Meowth was saying, patch was yesterday. So this is going to be just sort of on paper what I expect about the changes. But yeah, the Guff change, super important. You know, rather than just being able to mindlessly press the hero power button, unless you're Roffle, apparently. You know, you actually have to be able to think about weaving it in, which is good, I think. You know, like rather than having this sort of infinite benefit and creating, you know, a bit more tension, based on, you know, am I dying on board, or can I afford to ramp? And like Roffle was saying, every single mana crystal that doesn't get ramped snowballs to the next turn, right? And makes it even harder to ramp the following turn and harder to ramp the following turn. So it is a very significant nerf, but I really like it. I think it's a lot smarter than just putting it to 6, because I think at 6, it doesn't really change the play pattern at all. And I think this is a much healthier play pattern for a hero card. So I am a big fan of this change, while still thinking Guff is going to be one of the best cards in Druid anyway. So just good change. Very happy with this one.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Guff is still definitely one of the best cards in Druid. It just makes the explosiveness of like a turn 4, turn 5, turn 6 Guff a lot lower, which is good for the deck. It still has the insane, like the uncapping of the mana crystals is a huge deal still, right? Like you still get to Twig Sphere into 16 mana. You still get to, you know, gloop and have 20,000 mana the turn that you're glooping and flipper frenzing and stuff like that. So that's all still possible. Druid still gets to do the powerful things. Druid, I think, should still remain strong even with the Guff nerf, but the Guff nerf is very good. I think it's probably, I think of all the changes that we'll talk about today, probably the one that I'm like, probably the most well executed. I think like still feels like a good card, strong card, but like actually hit it at the power level and brought it to a power level that I think it's acceptable.
I mean, we say that, but like I just checked the replay like class win rates, and Druid is at the very bottom. And like typically with this little turnaround, I think it covers 24 hours, that like little metric, and it's not a perfect measure, obviously, but like Druid was doing just fine, and like the only thing that changed is Guff's like got hit pretty hard. So like it took a nosedive, and I would expect people to be playing largely the same Druid decks that they were before that were doing, you know, relatively fine, unless everybody just like collectively dusted their Guff and are not playing it. But like I doubt that's going to happen given the response to this nerf. So maybe it is. I can't see it being that impactful though. Like yes, it hurts, but it can't drop the win rate that much. So I think that things will probably stabilize. Druid has been like kind of messy since the alignment nerf anyway, because people are still jamming that and it's not good. So I don't know.
All right. Well, I think time will change. Time will tell. I think with the Guff nerf. I also think like the decks for non-Reno and Reno Druids are still like super messy. And so I wonder, like, you know, if you're a high legend player out there, tweet out your list, get people to net deck it in the new patch, and maybe we'll see kind of Druid's performance. But again, we haven't had too much time to play with it. My prediction, like Corbs, I think it'll still be a very good card, and I think Druid will still be fine. I do think people are overreacting a little bit. Like, he is obviously much worse than he used to be, but he was kind of by far and away the most busted card in Druid, and now he's like more in line, which I think is a good thing. All right, and now a change that nobody could have seen coming. A very surprising change. I don't know what they were thinking with this, but Edwin Defias Kingpin is going from a 3-mana 3/3 back to a 4-mana 4/4. So, I mean, this is just reversion. Just a little bit of sarcasm there. The dev comment here, there's been a lot of attention on Edwin ever since he was buffed in the last patch, and rightfully so. Since his buff, he's been one of the most highly played and winningest cards in the game. Didn't know that was a word, by the way. Which made him an obvious candidate for a high confidence adjustment to Rogue. When we made the initial buff, Rogue looked like it needed some help, but now that these lists have been more refined, we think Rogue will remain a player in the meta, even with meta back at 4, or Edwin back at 4. So again, Rogue in Standard was good. Edwin was good. In Wild, Edwin was good. Whether you were playing like a pirate list, or I think a lot of people were kind of hopping onto the Miracle Rogue hype train. I know, Corby, you were talking about weeks ago how it might be one of the best decks in the game. I know you kind of hopped back on that train a couple of days ago. You were still hyping up the Miracle Rogue. I mean, I guess start with you. Do you think Miracle Rogue can survive an Edwin to 4 nerf, or reversion, I guess?
Yeah, I think it'll be fine. Again, if you did ask me like a couple weeks ago, I thought that it was going to be a significant hit, and it is. You know, like it matters. But kind of what I've figured out is that Rogue is just sort of broken, I think. Well, not broken, but like Rogue can do a lot of very, very powerful things, I think, with the support that it got from the recent expansion, with, you know, the Serrated and the graveyard is kind of huge. And so I think that Rogue will still be very dominant over a lot of the board-based matchups. It's kind of like where it can feel a little bit oppressive when playing like Knolls, in particular, against things, you know, just like pirate decks or like even decks or whatever you're doing like that. And yeah, I just think the deck will be fine, which isn't kind of what I expected, because the Edwin nerf is such a huge deal for the card, but the card will still be good. You know, it just probably won't be like the best card in Rogue. And yeah, I think the deck will be fine. So I think Miracle Rogue as a whole just has so much. It just has such like, it has just a multitude of ways, right, of popping off. This isn't really standard, where it is kind of a little bit more Edwin centric. In Wild, just because we do have things like Passage, and the OG Edwin, this is kind of a little bit more leeway to win in more flexible ways. And so I think that the deck will probably be less affected than in Standard, but I don't know. Standard might be really good as well. I don't know.
Yeah, this is obviously just a bit of an oopsie on their part when they buffed it to begin with. It was a, you know, pretty high quality card at 4 mana as it stood ahead of time. Like, the one concern that I do have for this is that, you know, sometimes it is actually a 2 mana nerf, because if you want to shadow step it, you know, you have to pay the 1 extra the first time and then the 1 extra the second time as well, and that hits pretty hard. So some of those plays get, you know, slowed down a pretty significant amount. But like Corb was saying, when this first got buffed, I was playing an early version of the Miracle Rogue myself, and I was really just surprised at how infrequently this card was winning me games. It was often the Sunstone Graveyards or the Draka or whatever, like whatever my win condition was. It was like there were many of them is really what it felt like. And so like a singular card isn't what was carrying it. You know, you can consistently hit it with the Shroud of Concealment, but like I was struggling and getting frustrated with the lack of shrouds that I was drawing. So it's like, you know, I was still winning games though, because you still have other ways to generate lots of stats. So yeah, card's still probably good. I mean, that deck's definitely worse now, but because one of its important cards did get hit, but I wouldn't consider it dead necessarily. It's, you know, it was quite strong, and strong enough to get one of us a rank 1 legend, right? So I think that's gotta say something, that like that's not just gonna go away just because of the singular card necessarily.
Yeah. Congrats on your rank 1 with Miracle Rogue, by the way, Corb. I don't think we led with that, but everybody claps in the comments for that. But I agree with you. I think I will defer to Corb's comments earlier about the Miracle Rogue. I think we're inclined to trust him a little bit at this point when it comes to Miracle Rogue. I wanted to say, like, I guess I've been one of the few that's been hyping it up in Pirate Rogue, just because it's always performed good for me in Pirate Rogue, or well for me in Pirate Rogue. That being said, it going back to 4 probably kind of kills it in that deck. You don't really want to be running it in Pirate Rogue, which means the only place it'll be seeing play in Wild is probably that Miracle deck, but it does sound like it'll still be fine in that Miracle Rogue deck. I think, honestly, though, it was probably a good thing that this got buffed, because it got it on everybody's radar in Wild when it came to that deck on everybody's radar. I don't care about what's going on in Standard. I know it was miserable for the past couple of weeks. Who cares? All right, let's talk about Mage. So Mage getting 2 cards nerfed here. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not like super well in tuned with Standard. Very surprised to see both of these hit. But I mean, I guess we'll talk about it a little bit. But first thing, Magister Dawngrasp hero powers. This is the hero card, the one where it dealt 2 damage, and if it honorably killed, it pumped the damage. It used to pump the damage by 2. Now it only pumps the damage by 1 when you honorably kill. And then Nightcloak Sanctum, so this is the location card. This was like the one skeleton card in Wild that we were like, yeah, this is good enough to see play. Apparently that was too good for Standard. It has been nerfed from 3 durability to 2, so it is still a 3 mana location that freezes in someone's skeleton, but you can only do it twice. And so just to read through some of the dev comments here. So along with Druid and Rogue, Mage has been one of the most dominant classes since the last patch. Sanctum has been a clear outlier in the mid stages of the game, and the scaling threat of Dawngrasp hero power has been dominant in the end game. These two standout cards are the most obvious targets for tuning down the deck's power level and should make the class less frustrating to play against in the mid and late game. Alright, so I will also say, I don't think I've seen these cards a single time in Wild either. How do you guys think this is going to impact our format?
I've been seeing Necklace Sanctum pop up here and there. Like, it was a good enough card that people were running it in a 40-card Secret Mage list. Like, it was as printed, and we said this even before the expansion. This is probably too strong. Like, right? Like, this is the ones. Like, this is strong enough that you're running it even if you're not necessarily in a volatile skeleton type deck, right? Like, so that's indicative of a card that's probably just too strong. You wouldn't run like, Abyssal Wave in every single Warlock deck, right? Like that would be silly. So you wouldn't expect that to, work the same way with something that's part of a larger, core set of cards. With Dawn Grasp, I think this is a change a lot of people are eyeing simply because in Standard that was the card that won games of Hearthstone, and like games were decided on how soon you drew that card, how early you ramped it, and like kind of like with Guff, I think they wanted to get away from like single card win the game if you play it early type things. And so I think this is a similar change to the Guff change to like tone down the power level of something so that, yeah, if you play it, it's still probably pretty strong, but like it's not single-handedly winning you the game. So I don't know. It doesn't really affect Wild all that much, but probably good changes for Standard.
Oh, poor LPG Mage, just taking L's left and right, every expansion. Yeah, I don't know. Not really too important right now, but like long term, it does really hurt Mage's stock, right? Like these were two very powerful tools for any sort of Reno Mage. Like not even memeing about it, and yeah, it kind of does hurt that those are taken away. But yeah, I don't know. Otherwise, you do see the location here and there, maybe in the 40-card Secret Mage type deck, but apart from that, not a lot of play right now. So,
well, I mean, Magister Dawngrasp has been adjusted like 3 times now, I feel like, which is weird, right? Because of all cards, and then I guess 4 if you count the like Wildfire change, where like it's staying active after you've changed hero powers. Man, Dawngrasp has been through a roller coaster. Same with all Mage fans, I feel like, the past year or so. All right, next up, we've got Defend the Dwarven District. If this deck wasn't already dead, it feels like it might officially be now. Quest Hunter is a frustrating deck to play against and was poised to be a powerful meta contender after the changes to other classes. This change is both to address the deck's current state and anticipated relative power level after this patch. The first line of the quest also requires 3 spells now instead of 2. God, frick quest lines, man. I'm so happy if they never change any of these back. Thank God.
Yeah, I think we just talked about this last episode where like Questline Hunter has been struggling for a while in Wild as it stands, and this like I would not want to be the opponent that I queued into running odd Questline Hunter with 40 cards and the newly nerfed Defend the Dwarven District like I did. It was embarrassing for them. they were completing the quest so late, like, and I had like I just had so many copies of Reno that they didn't stand a chance, and it was like they were already slow, and then to add insult to injury, like I was just piling on all these Renos. The deck's not good, and then like already I think that the powerful card that you want to be running in Questline Hunter is Furious Howl, and if you're an odd version, you're struggling to get like 40 capable cards in your deck to begin with, and it's like you don't have Furious Howl, so you don't have refill. Even with Furious Howl, opponents have 40 health a lot of the time. It's just not a good deck right now, and it got quite a bit worse. I'm with Meowth, though. I don't think they need to, like, they can buff the deck by adding more damage spells. They don't need to set back to 2 in the future. I don't think there's a whole lot of nostalgia for, Wild folks when this does rotate.
Yeah, I don't know entirely if the deck is like dead because a lot of the time, like in Wild, you end up sort of floating mana on the turn before completing the quest, so that way you can play one spell and then complete it and play at the same turn, right? That way you don't get Dirty Ratted or Theotar. Well, Theotar's a bit of an issue regardless. But you know, you don't get dirty ratted. And so you can kind of often set it up where this probably doesn't matter at the final stage. But yeah, the early board control matters a lot. Like this significantly hurts the aggro matchups. I think that long-term Quest Hunter could be revitalized, but funnily enough, the win condition is kind of just slow for the type of deck it is, right? Like you don't get it online, then you slowly burn people out from turn 7, 8, 9. It's not really cutting it in the world of Renathal and like all these other fast combo decks. So I don't know. I doubt they'll revert any of the quest lines though, for what it's worth. I think Demon Seed will probably be the only one that we see get changed on the rotation when they eventually unban it.
Yeah, I mean we can talk about quest lines later down the line. I feel like that's an episode of its own. But I mean, I think like it has been said, it doesn't change current landscape of Wild. I feel like with Quest Hunter nerf because it was already seeing very little play and it wasn't very strong. It felt like even when it was seeing play. And it's getting worse, and so doesn't really feel like it's gonna impact Wild super hard. But man, that's like 3 or 4 changes out of the questline hunter too. Like, United and Stormwind and these hero cards afterwards have just been, All right, next up, speaking of cards that are dead now, let's talk about Kael'thas. So they really just wanted to butcher this Bran Kael'thas Sire to Nathria's combo in standard that pretty much every slow deck was running, and so they wanted to just kill that, and so they felt the best solution was to add 2 more costs to the Bran Kael'thas combo so they can't be played with 10 mana. So we preferred to change Kael'thas over Bran because Kael'thas is being primarily used for things like this combo, while Bran has other interesting use cases. So Kael'thas going from 6 mana to 8 every 3rd minute you play each turn, cost 0. This is actually kind of relevant because I feel like there were the decks that were doing Bran, Kael'thas, Denathrius, and Wild too no longer get to do that, right? Which is relevant.
Did we have many though? I mean, I guess we had a couple that were sort of
I think there were some.
I mean,
Druids,
it's not like Rena.
right?
It's not like Rena Priest were playing it. Druid didn't really play it that much because they could just ramp beyond 10. So we had things like Reno Paladin. Yeah,
Reno
like
Paladin
Reno
and Shaman,
Paladin,
right?
Reno Shaman, like
Yeah.
very fringy type things. So I don't know. I don't think it affects things again current landscape wise. Like long term, it does certainly hurt Shaman. I think quite a lot. Is the most notable one, but I don't know. They just deleted this card. Like it is so funny how Kael'thas was meant to be this huge mistake coming into the set, and it's like, okay, what combo does it use? And like no one could ever actually answer the question about how it was going to break the format. And it turns out this silly little Bran Sire thing as standard is actually what did the damage. Well, it had like very little impact in Wild. And yeah, that just nuked it. Like it's just it's dead. So
I had this whole bit lined up about how I was going to talk about what are you talking about, Corb? That as everyone predicted, this is completely broken the Wild format. It's literally unplayable thanks to Kael'thas, just as predicted. And you went and you just kind of pulled the rug out from under me. But yeah, like I could see this getting reverted, and it wouldn't be the same.
They would.
Kael'thas. I
they
know
would
they
never
won't.
revert a card
I
like
know.
this, Roffle. A Kael'thas card like this? No way.
I know. Well, I'm talking crazy, right?
Yeah.
This would be a much less gear reversion than the original Kael'thas, so I could definitely see it because, like you said, like this was not played in Wild. It did have, I will say, it had some cute interactions, not with just Denathrius. The thing that I'll miss is like Bran, Alexstrasza, or Bran, Kael'thas, Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza. And you can get those 2 extra 0-cost minions, play those, and then get something else out for free. And that was something that was pretty cool. But that's not like format breaking. That's just like a strong turn 9 play. Like the fact that it's coming out on turn 9, if Bran is your activator, like really means it's not going to be that like the thing that steals games in the Wild format. It might give you a nice swing turn that your opponent then promptly clears or doesn't and loses. But like if you're in a position where you can make that play, you're probably ahead going into that turn anyway. So yeah, this is a standard change. It makes sense because you can't change Bran because like nostalgia. don't know how you change Sire to Nathrias, to be honest with you. So like if you're looking to break up that combo, this is the card that you have to do it. And unfortunately, it gets nuked because like it needs to go to 8. It can't just go to 7. So like, what else are you gonna do? Like, I would have been more upset if they changed brand. If we're being honest, I would have probably been more upset. I think Sire to Nathrias is a fine card in Wild. So like, I don't want them changing that. So like, sure, kill Kael'thas. I don't care.
Yeah, Sides and Atheros is also like the marquee legendary of the set, and so it was probably always a bit less likely. It's also really really hard card to change in a way that makes sense.
Right. Like what do you do?
It's super difficult. Yeah, I've heard the suggestion of like putting it to end of turn as like a continuous thing, but it's like, okay, you can't OTK people with the brand combo, but then it's just like this perpetual threat that if you don't kill it, you immediately die. So
without the brand Kael'thas, that's just a better card.
Right. So I don't know how you change it. Like you can tone it down, I guess, but like how do you even tone it down? Do you just put it down to like initially 1 life steal? But that doesn't matter in the late game matchups. So I don't know. It's very complicated. And again, they probably don't even want to hit it. And so they just killed it. They just
you increase the damage by 0.5 rounded down every infused.
0.5. Yeah.
It's a digital card game, Corb. They can make those types of changes.
And we can just balance it. We can balance the fraction depending on exactly how powerful it is. Yeah.
Right. No, I think in Wild in particular, I think Denathrius is just like a card. Like it's a card that exists in greedy decks. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you should be interested in playing the marquee legendary of a new set in your like greedy Reno decks. If you ask me, I don't know, but that seems fine to me.
Yeah, I mean, kind of bringing it back to like the Shaman deck, right? That was like the one deck we kind of saw it in. Like I was playing it in the Renathal, like I don't want to call it free Shaman anymore, so just like Shudderwalk Shaman, like the control Shamans. But like the schooling with Kael'thas was like super sweet. Cheating out like Mutanuses and Denathriuses and like early Shudderwalks, so I'm gonna miss that. But like I completely understand that they needed to neuter this card. I wonder if we like see it reverted back to 6 next year when we get the new core set, and they're probably gonna yeet Bran out of the core set along with the other League of Explorer cards, and so then I wonder if Kael'thas comes back to 6 at that point. But yeah, I mean I agree with everything you guys said. Like I wouldn't have wanted a brand change, and I couldn't figure out a Denathrius change that would have been good. So like obviously it had to be Kael'thas. I also don't think we've seen a card like War Songed this hard in a very long time, which was very surprising. I was just thinking.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I was like, God, the Elucia nerf was really bad. But that was like a total rework. But there's not that many that we get that are just deleting like this.
Is Elucia like the last one that was as bad, you think?
Probably. Like I was trying to think of anything else, and like we don't really get 2-mana nerfs very often at all. Sometimes we get it like with Flesh Giant, we got like the incremental nerf, but even at 10, the card was still like playable. So I don't know.
Interesting to see what happens to Kael'thas kind of long term. This had to happen. A little sad to see it happen, I think, from a WoW perspective, but for Standard, I think it absolutely had to. So then another card that apparently needed to happen for Standard, Smothering Starfish, going from 3 mana to 4. So Smothering Starfish was living up to its name a bit too much. The goal for this card was for it to be a strong tech card, but the cost to include in your deck was low enough that it was acting more like a staple than a tech card. While responding to specific meta forces, Starfish was also unintentionally snuffing out a variety of underrepresented decks. So we think this adjustment will still allow Starfish to be used as a powerful tech option, but make it less generally ubiquitous. So like I think the comment specifically that they had that it was like smothering Paladin in like a Rage Warrior decks. And so that was an unintentional use of the name. I'm sorry. But Smothering Starfish going from 3 to 4. So I've seen a couple people call this a buff. Because now you get to play it in Even Warlock instead of having to use Showstopper, the 2-mana 3/2 Death Rattle silence all your minions. And so you get to run this in Even Warlocks now. And I don't know anywhere else that it was seeing play. So I guess, do you guys want to call this a buff, or what do you guys think about this?
No, I mean it was seeing play in Pirate Rogue.
Shouldn't be seeing play in Pirate Rogue.
I agree with that, but like people kept arguing with me over it, so like I gave up on caring, because if they want to make their Pirate Rogue deck worse, I'm fine with that. Now they can make it really worse because this card is quite a bit worse in that style of deck now. I think that like I'm right there with the Nightcloak Sanctum change. Like this card should have never been 3 mana. If you look at the history of like silence in Hearthstone, like, and while we're at it, Shard of the Naru shouldn't be 1 mana and tradable, but like the mass silence like this shouldn't be that efficient. And like when you're paying, you know, premium mana cost for like neutral single target silences in the past, like compare this card to like, you know, Spellbreaker, the tradable one, and even Owl. Like, it's outrageous how much you're underpaying for this card, or we're underpaying for this card. So I'm fine with the change, even if it's you know, I don't know, like, yeah, maybe it'll see play in Even Warlock. I'm fine with that as well. It's still 4 mana. That's a pretty big commitment for Even Warlock. Especially when Free Shaman is less prevalent. Like, what are you silencing? Taunts? I guess that helps, but like, then you can't really play this on the same turn as Battle Master, because why is the game at turn 10 if you're Even Warlock? So, yeah, I don't know. I don't care. This card maybe could you give it a stat or something. I really don't care. Like, I just think that it shouldn't have been at 3 mana to begin with. Like, you can't simultaneously complain about, like, you know, perpetual power creep and then like lament the death of a blatant power creep card like this, you know? Like, this card was busted and shouldn't have been printed as a 3 mana card. I think this is still probably too strong compared to other silence effects, but like, sure. It's fine. I don't care.
Yeah, whether it goes an Even Warlock, I kind of think, I guess it might be better than Showstopper, but it's probably very close, so it's like, whatever. I mean, it is a huge buff to Pirate Rogue, because people will be forced to put it out of their deck, right, guys? They're not going to actually continue to play this.
Sure,
right, guys?
You don't know how adamant my Twitch chat was about how good of a card it is in that deck, because of that one time it got them lethal.
Oh, I forgot about that one time. Oh my god, I totally missed that. Yeah.
Never mind all my opponents getting 2 attack swordfishes, because they're running 2 copies of this bad boy at the bottom of their deck.
Yeah. It actually reminds me a lot of the bad, like, Albatross nerf. That might be a weird comparison, but just as like this 3 mana neutral that was sort of this like way overly ubiquitous, and just kind of getting splashed in random decks. And they were just like, yeah, this is kind of oppressing some fringe archetypes and things like that. Last time I think it was like, I can't even remember exactly what Albatross was doing. I guess like Pure Powered and some Reno decks at the time. And they just bumped it and just kind of deleted it. And I mean, that's kind of probably what's going to happen a little bit in Standard. Like, I don't know if this will see a ton of play, but hopefully it does give Warrior and Paladin a little bit more breathing room. But that's it. I don't think Starfish was the big thing holding those decks back, but I'm happy to be wrong.
Yeah. We'll get into that once we get to a couple of these other changes. Side tangent, you brought up Reno decks. Has there been a Reno deck that's been good this year in Standard? Like, they brought back Reno to the core set.
No.
No?
No. Well, I mean, Meowth, you gotta wait one expansion maybe. I think that might be
spoilers.
What's happening.
Yeah. All right.
We'll see.
I mean, they didn't just throw those cards into the mini set for no reason, or into the core set for no reason, right? Like, just
exactly.
I mean,
here,
sure.
have some.
Yeah.
I don't know, but Brand's been doing a lot of work, I guess.
Yeah, Brand's been kind of everywhere, I feel like. All right. So those are the nerfs. So what is that? 6 nerfs, I think. Guff, Rogue, 2 Mage, Hunter, and Smothering Starfish. In addition to those 6 nerfs, we did get 2 buffs. So they're kind of dialing back some of the changes to Schoolteacher. So this used to be a 4 mana 5/4 that gave you a Noggling that you taught a spell to that would cast. And it was kind of like the new Azure Drake, where it was in like every deck last expansion. And so they nerfed it, and they're kind of dialing back some of those nerfs. It is coming back to a 4/4 for 4 mana instead of a 5/4. And so the dev comment here, when we initially changed Schoolteacher, it was the most played card in the game. We're partially wording the balance change in order to make it the card feel a little bit better to include in decks, while still acknowledging that its power level at launch was a bit higher than we would have liked it to be. Schoolteacher back to 4/4. Don't know if this is going to make its way into any wild decks. Probably not. Maybe the Reno Shaman decks. But...
It was like barely playable as a 5/4. Like, it was looking okay in certain decks, certain classes. Again, this comes up a lot, but when you're talking about the wild format and discovering from a card pool, a spell pool in this case, even if it is narrowed down to 3 or less, in certain classes, that's still a broad pool to choose from, and you're going to get some real big whiffs. Like, I don't think you'd really want to be playing this in Priest all that much. Like, there's some pretty bad low-cost spells. Same thing with Mage. Like, there are a lot of very specific things like elemental evocation and like those types of, if you just brick completely, which is very possible, you just end up with a 5-mana 5/5 split over 2 bodies. So, over time, that's only going to become more possible, more probable, potentially even, like that you're not going to be able to isolate specific cards that you want. So I could see this card getting worse over time. It may be like at a point where it's still a playable card in certain classes right now, but like over time, it's probably not going to be the case. It like as a 4/3, it was real bad though. So like the 4/3 in terms of the health is like the health was probably more important, and like that's a pretty big break point. But I don't know if this makes it like I don't know, a card that we'll see too much of it in Wild even after the buff.
I can maybe see it in Demon Hunter at some point, just because of the predation. And like, but and then Demon Hunter also tends to have like pretty high quality spells, but
And fewer.
Yeah. Huh? Oh,
And
and fewer.
fewer.
Yeah. But I mean, Demon Hunter, Wild.
Yeah.
Lol. So
XW, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. One last change here to Alliance Bannerman. So it's going back to a 2/2. So they reverted the buff that reverted the nerf that they gave him a long time ago. And so some dev comments here, and then a follow-up tweet or two from Aleko that I just want to read through. So when we buff cards in underperforming classes, we rarely do it with the goal of immediately shooting the class to a 50+% win rate. Our goal is to make the game more fun, something we can accomplish by bringing up the class to a level where where players feel like there's something worth exploring. So with a focus on high confidence changes in this patch, the change we were most confident that we could give Paladin was something we've seen before, a reversion to a previous balance change. And so Aleko on Twitter later that day, or I guess later yesterday, went on to kind of further talk about the Bannerman buff. And so I think a lot of players incorrectly interpret buffs we make to a class as a signal that we think the buff will fix all of the class's problems. Like we mentioned in the patch notes, that wasn't the goal with this buff. Paladin has some issues right now that we don't think buffs alone can fix. They likely need new cards. The Bannerman buff is a high confidence change we can make to make the class, which we will believe will make the game more fun. So we did it. There's not much more to it than that. And so they're not really predicting that this is going to have a big impact, I think, in Standard. So let's just kind of talk about kind of the ripple effects in Wild. A lot of people are kind of sad to see this change because you can no longer draw it off of Sawhead's Pride, which is like an interaction that came up when it was nerfed previously, because this was during like hand buff Paladin kind of times, heyday, where you would play Sawhead's Pride, which is a 3-mana 3/1 with Death Rattle draw 2/1 health minions from your deck, and so you could draw Bannerman from that. That's not a synergy that's seeing any play right now because hand buff Paladin and Libram Paladin and things like that just don't exist. And so this is not really a nerf to Bannerman, guys. This is a buff. It's going back to a 2/2. As a 2/2, I think it's still seeing play in Reno Paladin as a 2/1, and so probably this is a buff to stuff like Reno Paladin. Though I guess my inclination is that it's not going to actually move the needle on Paladin any in Wild, but it is nice to have it back.
I don't know that it went anywhere. Like you weren't playing the card for the body. Sometimes it became relevant. This isn't like if you compare this to the Demon Hunter 2/2 that got nerfed to a 2/1, like it's night and day. Like the guy that summons the tokens, yeah, the Vanguard. Like it's night and day. You're playing this for the battle cry. So yeah, like the stat line matters, and like yeah, it was a nerf and now it is a buff because like it could value trade over 1/2s or 1/1s, but like again, you're playing this for the future turns and the value you get off that, and most importantly the card draw. I think this card like kind of does too much as it is. It has too much text, too many numbers on it as a 3-mana 2/2. but I don't think it's going like I don't. Again, I don't care. Like it's still like you still played in the same deck that you were playing it before. You probably just played in like nearly every Paladin deck at this point, other than Odd Paladin. I don't think it's going to change a whole lot in terms of like the stat line because I don't think it has a high enough play rate to really matter. It was a good card before the nerf. It was a good card after the nerf. It's a good card after the buff. Like it's just a good card. It does good things. It has a lot of text on it, and it gives your whole hand +1/+1 while drawing a card. That's nuts.
I'm kind of just laughing because I think Roffle summarized my thoughts perfectly. I don't care. I don't care. Like
You just
it's whatever.
I feel like people too often get like caught up in the weeds of stuff like this, like that one stat can matter a whole lot. Like it mattered for the Vanguard. It just does not matter for this card. That's like that is not the reason you're playing it. Like in the same way that like when I was talking about the Smothering Starfish, sure, give it a stat. I don't care. Like that's not why you're playing the card. Like I don't like you're I don't know, fixated on the wrong part of it. Like the thing that makes this card strong and playable is its battlecry text.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. It's going to feel a lot better to play as a 2/2 and not have it die to patches or Flay Fighter battle cries and things like that. But like you said, the stats aren't the reason you're playing this card. And therefore, a change to the stats is not going to change the needle for Paladin all that much. All right, so now let's kind of transition. So we've had 6 buffs, or 6 nerfs, 2 buffs. Let's kind of talk about the cards that didn't get changed. And let's start with Theotar, because that was the one that people were claiming for in Standard. And so Aleko talked a little bit about this on Twitter. I really wish they would just do this in the patch notes, by the way. Just kind of a side note. These cards that they didn't touch or formats that they didn't touch, if they would just talk about it in the patch notes so we don't have to go hunting on Twitter. But basically, Aleko says, I'm getting a lot of questions about Theotar. Happy to add a little bit of context as to why we didn't change him this patch. We definitely talked about him, but decided against changes for a few reasons. The biggest reasons that our focus this patch was on high confidence changes. We weren't high confidence in what the meta would look like if we changed Theo, especially with all the other changes that we were doing. We really wanted this patch to improve things and weren't looking to take big risk, so we decided it was better to wait and see how things landed. We're also hitting a number of cards this patch, Guff, Dawn Grasp, and the Kael Brand Nathria's combo. The Theotar was primarily being played to counter. There's a chance that he goes down in win rate and play rate naturally, and if he doesn't, he'll definitely be a card we discuss again next patch window. So I guess kind of 2 questions that I want to open up to you guys. What are your thoughts on Theotar in Wild? Because I know people have some controversial, feelings about Theotar in our format. And then were you surprised that he didn't get touched? Happy that he didn't get touched? Stuff like that.
Yeah, I think like most people, I was pretty surprised, especially since they kind of like alluded to a lot of like neutral, high play rate cards, and like Theotar definitely fit the bill. So I definitely understand why people were anticipating a Theotar nerf. I personally was, and like I said, I was a little bit surprised that it didn't get hit. I'm a bit of a Theotar apologist myself. Like I feel like we just came out of a metagame where a lot of damage from hand, a lot of like hard to disrupt combos were happening. Things like Quest Mage still exist. Things like Pillager Rogue are always like kind of on the back of people's minds, and Theotar doesn't single-handedly beat some of those decks, in particular Quest Mage, but like it's disruptive enough to like actually slow them down a little bit, and I think that's what you want out of a card like Theotar. I think the problem with Theotar is when you're like a single card win condition or close to it, which they printed a single card win condition in Denathrius this set. So like I think that's where a lot of the interaction between Denathrius and Theotar in particular, I think, is what has a lot of people upset about him, because like it feels bad to build up this big win condition on a singular card and then just have it taken from you, and not only taken from you but given to the opponent, who then plays it and wins with it. So like I don't know that we would have the same like hatred of Theotar in particular in Standard if he weren't released in the same set as Denathrius, because of like the effort involved in ramping up your Denathrius, and then to just have that taken away from you feels pretty bad. I like the disgusting greedy Reno mini meta game that we kind of have going on right now. So like I said, I'm a bit of a Theotar Apologist because I think that it helps. It's part of what's keeping those decks relevant, and it gives them another disruption tool. That said, I could have easily seen this going to like 5 or 6 mana and still like with maybe a stat line adjustment. I think the speed at which he's able to come out and the fact that you can just like, hey, maybe I'll play this in an aggro deck, probably is indicative of a bit of a problem. Like I was just running it in Even Shaman. That you probably shouldn't be running a card like Theotar, or you probably shouldn't be so heavily rewarded, I guess, for running a card like Theotar in a deck like Even Shaman, I think is my concern. So I could see this getting bumped up, a mana or two in the future just to slow down some of the disruption and not allow you to, not necessarily slow it down, but also not allow you to do other things the turn that you're playing him. In particular, like a brand could be, a consideration as well. So, yeah, we'll probably see a Theotar change at some point, right? Like, people don't like this card. People are going to clamor for it, and people are probably going to still keep playing it, even with the changes that we saw.
Yeah, the overwhelming theme of these changes, and the word is kind of like scattered throughout, whether we're talking about the Edwin change comments or the Paladin comments, it's all just like high confidence, right? Like that's what we're talking about when all these patch notes happen, and it's basically just because the expansion launch at standard really sucked. Well, okay, sucked. Saying the launch sucked is maybe a little bit harsh, but the expansion was going alright, and then they made some preemptive changes because they have a very tight window. They screwed it up, like by doing the Edwin change and by nerfing Snowfall and leaving everything else go to absolute hell. And they just couldn't screw it up again, right? They had to make like very safe changes that they felt like had very clear results. Like they toned down the most powerful cards by small amounts, sort of identified cards that people have been complaining about for a while. And Theotar is definitely one of the more volatile cards because it sees play everywhere in standard. It sees play in half the decks, and so it's like, if we nerf this and it's a harsh nerf, like what the hell happens? And I just don't think they knew. And I think that's totally fair to say, like, look, we just want to play this safe. It makes a lot of sense as to why they wanted to nail this before heading into the mini set. So I think that's just the first thing, like, to get out the context of why they didn't nerf Theotar in the first place. As for like my feelings on Theotar, I think is one of the cards that I feel maybe the most conflicted about. Like I have a lot of complicated feelings on Theotar, probably more so than any other card that I've ever seen in Hearthstone, or close to it, where it's just so interesting, right? Because that domino effect that we're talking about of like what happens if you nerf it, what opens up on the floodgates. And the thing is, there is so much uncertainty, and it's like, is Theotar being a net positive? Is it a net negative? Is the games where you play Theotar on 4, and you steal the opponent's Theotar, and then you play it again, you steal the opponent's hero card? Are those, like, worthwhile? Are they fun? Like, is it good that there's that level of disruption? Is it a good thing that the card is so damaging against solitaire decks? Things like Pillager Rogue, and can just completely solo those types of decks. At the same time, like, if you nerf it and it's unplayable, or you nerf it too harshly, does the meta become better? Even though it's supported by this very toxic card that can single-handedly just win games based on what 3 cards you're offered and which cards get swapped. I don't know. My my general feeling is that in standard, it's probably a negative, and they probably need to hit it, and they will. In wild, I'm kind of on the 50-50. Maybe it's a slight positive in my opinion right now, but regardless, I think they are going to nerf Theotar within the next 2 patches. I think they just really want to nail this one, but they'll probably get the card. And I think a 5 mana nerf is appropriate, like putting it to 5, because 5 mana is good, I think, for Theotar, because it means that the Theotar player has a lot more cost of a tempo loss on that turn, and it also gives the other player more time to sort of like draw into more cards or set up and play their stuff that they want to dump and not get Theotar'd. It just gives a little bit more breathing room. It makes it a little bit tougher for Theotar to see, just get slapped down on 4 and it's always good, or it's good a lot of the time. So I think it'll go to 5 within like a couple patches, but yeah, very complicated feelings, and I understand why there's so much discourse around this card in general.
Yeah, I think you articulated my feelings like super well, where like I feel like a little bit of a hypocrite because like for years now I'm just like, I want more disruption in wild, right, to help combat the solitaire decks, and Theotar is that, right? A lot of people like Theotar because it helps them beat stuff like the Quest Mage and the Pillager Rogues and the Mechatheme, like the decks that are very unfun to lose to. This gives you a very strong tool against those, and so I think a lot of people really love having a card like that. But I think the way that it is doing it is a very toxic and unfun way. I think it's a very similar reaction. I think it's less on the level of like pre-change Elucia, but it functions in a very similar way, right? Like it's a way to disrupt combo decks and these unfun solitaire decks, but in a very toxic way. And I think the part to me that is like even less fun to me is like, so every deck is running Theotar, and then you run into these control decks where you're running a ton of disruption, and it very much becomes very much like a I always think back to like the Rena Lock mirrors that used to happen, right? Where it really just came down to what did you hit with your Dirty Rat, right? And what did you hit with your Gnome Feratu? And like that was just like the coin flip that won games in control mirrors, much more than a lot of this decision making that came down. And like it's why I really don't like the priest deck that's kind of running around. Like I know a lot of people do, and I'm glad that there's like a control. Or first of all, I'm glad that Rena Priest is back. Like it's been a while, but like the deck that it's literally built on. Okay, I win the game because I have my disruption, and then I steal all of your disruption and use it against you again, sort of thing. And like this is where I feel like a hypocrite, right? Because I want cards like this to exist, but the way that Theotar does it feels really freaking bad. Because I think the part that feels really bad is, I think, Roffle, you talked about this, where you watch the opponent take your good cards and then use them against you. And so, like, I don't know if Theotar, instead of maybe a mana cost, like, shuffling it into your deck, or, like, to slow them down, or, like, I don't know if discarding it is better or worse. But, like, it's a very volatile card. Even for me, personally, I still can't make up my mind on whether I like it or not. Like, I love it when I play it, and then when it's played against me, it feels really bad. And so... Yeah.
No, I think that's exactly it. The conflict is who's playing the card.
Exactly.
Like the reason you have both positive and negative feelings is because it feels it's very polarizing in as a card. Like if you play it and you steal your opponent's Denathrius and then like jam it next turn, that feels great. I love doing that. When that happens to me, I want to quit the game of Hearthstone. Like so, it's like it's completely understandable, but like. Disruption is always going to be super polarizing, and that doesn't. I don't know. Going back to what Corb said, I don't like right now. I feel like that disruption is, maybe making Wild a better place because it helps interrupt those solitaire type decks, and like even in standard, like people were just complaining about like too much from hand damage and too much like uninteractive combos. Like Theotar is keeping those at bay, so like. Be careful what you wish for, I guess is what I would say for everybody that like hates Theotar, because like what Corb said, this goes back to the high confidence changes. We don't know what the implications or the like downstream effect of like nerfing Theotar and pulling him out of a lot of decks would be, and that could make things worse because like I would argue that the previous metagame was worse than this one. Questline's metagame was certainly worse than this one, so I don't really want to go back to that type of thing. And Theotar is a part of what's making the current metagame what it is.
No, I will walk it back a little bit. Like I agree with you. I think the meta is in a much better spot with Theotar in it, like currently. Like I think this meta much more enjoyable personally, and I think just much more like balanced in archetypes and things like that as well. Somebody said this, and I believe it was. I don't remember who it was, but I'm not going to do them justice with like how I'm paraphrasing it. But they were like, so Theotar is doing a very good job at bandaging some of the really problematic decks in Wild, right? Like it's really good against stuff like the Quest Mage and the Pillagers and things like that. However, we hopefully in an ideal world wouldn't need the Band-Aid, right? Like in an ideal world, they would touch those decks, and then we wouldn't need Theotar to kind of be the savior of Wild, But because those decks exist, we kind of need Theotar, and then there's all these downstream ripple effects of Theotar being run in every deck, right? And so it's like we were saying, it's conflicting to me. Like I'm happy that Theotar exists, because I don't have to see Quest Mage and Pillager Rogue. When my opponents play 4 Theotars against me because they've Zolid it and they have an Elise and they've used Bran and then they steal my Theotar, like, those are the games that I'm just going to close Hearthstone for the day. But I think just ultimately big picture, it's probably good for the format. I think the Theotar Renathal inclusions have been great for kind of just the general WoW player base. Like, has made the format much more enjoyable for the more general fan of Wild. Probably loves this expansion because of those 2 cards.
Yeah, they're both very polarizing cards too, though.
Exactly.
So like, a lot of people have very negative, strong feelings about both of them, understandably so. I think that I think the important thing and what helps me get past those really frustrating games where my Theotar or where my opponent plays a Theotar or 6 is that, like, the metagame isn't just the last game of Hearthstone that I played, and it's like really easy to forget that. That it's also not the last game that you just played. Like, there are broader, like, it's a wide net or wide data set of games happening at any given point, and like for every time that Theotar is winning an Ultra Greed game, he's giving that Ultra Greed deck a chance against some of those very solitaire-esque combo decks. So yeah, it's hard to, like, I don't know, go with that line of thought after it just happened to you, but like that's the reality of the situation from my perspective.
Yeah, it's very much do the ends justify the means. Like that's the thing, right? Like it's potentially curbing this very toxic environment by doing something toxic itself, but maybe that's okay. And like, I will emphasize as well, like, the Theotar in Standard is very different than Theotar in Wild. It sees, like, playing about 30 to 35% of Wild decks. That's a lot. So he's playing half the Standard decks, like literally half. So, we're talking about like a 15% jump there. And also Wild decks are, naturally a bit more resilient to Theotar because they have to be resilient to things like Dirty Rat in general. So like those types of combo decks on average have a few more win conditions. Like in Standard, right, you're playing against a Druid, you steal the Nathrius, the game kind of ends probably a lot of the time. In Wild, they steal the Nathrius. You could still, like, Bran Alex them. You could still do a whole bunch of other dumb Druid things, and like this is sort of this natural sort of way to combat that. So yeah, I think it's a lot better in Wild in general, but I don't know. My feelings still so complicated on this card. Like, I think the important thing as well for people to realize is that if Theotar didn't exist, Reno Priest, Reno Druid, Curse Warlock, a lot of these decks would not exist probably either. Like, Reno Priest in particular, I think would just be gone. So even with the addition of Renathal. And so I think that Theotar is helping this really, really diverse environment in Wild right now. If you want to play Reno Greed, you can. If you want to play combo, you can. If you want to play aggro and whatever, you can. And I think this is the most diverse and kind of all over the place that Wild has been since, I don't know, years. Like, since the last time Reno Warlock was good in, like, 2020. So I think Theotar in general is kind of helping out Wild a lot, but I still expect it'll get changed because, again, probably far too damaging card in Standard. So
yeah. Like I said, the inclusion of Theotar and Renathal, I think, has been great for the WoW format. Just kind of general. When was the last time that we had like this many kind of like viable archetypes and decks in Wild? It's felt like it's been a minute.
Well, I mean, Reno decks specifically, have just sort of been on the back burner for a long time.
I feel like I mentioned this before, but I feel like Reno decks are a good barometer for like the Wild format and like how the broader player base's enjoyment of it. And I think the last time we maybe saw something like this was Forged in the Barrens with the 2/4 watch post. So like, yeah, it's been a bit. Like, it's a pre-questline for sure. Questline's kind of push these types of decks out.
Yeah. All right, so we'll see if the meta continues to be like this post changes. Kind of the big one to keep an eye on is what is the impact of that Guff nerf, I think, and kind of the ripple effects of that one. All right, one last thing I want to cover on today's episode is, so we talked about Theotar that wasn't touched. A lot of people are going to be talking about maybe another archetype or two that haven't been touched, specifically Big Priest and or Quest Mage. So first of all, another shameless plug here. Corb made a video covering this exact topic, probably a lot more in depth than we're going to talk about today. We'll link it down in the comments and description. Make sure you guys go watch that and support Corb. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good with that. Yeah.
That being said, Corb, do you kind of want to lead the discussion here about why they didn't touch Big Priest or Quest Mage?
Oh, sure. I mean, with Big Priest, I mean, the thing is, whenever we talk about like wild specific changes, and I, again, kind of like verbatim talk about this in the vid that I did, but they want to hit on stuff for wild if there's a huge population, if it's like overpowered, or if there's disgusting play pattern, it happens consistently, and or is a long-term problem. And this kind of goes through if you look at like the Darklet changes or the big rogue, big shaman. It's kind of usually always hitting on these kind of things, at least 2 out of 3. And yeah, Big Priest is popular at Diamond, but it's not overwhelmingly popular. It's like 13%. That's a bit, but it's not like usually up when we're getting up to 20 and stuff. That's like a really high population, and that kind of falls off a bit more low ranks. The high roll that it has with Illuminate doesn't happen that often. It happens maybe 1 in 10, slightly less of Big Priest games, which is very frustrating when it happens, but it's not like this consistently, over and over type thing that's happening. And then the deck itself, while good at like X10 MMR and stuff, it is never powered, and then it falls off dramatically at Legend. So I think Big Priest is kind of like in the conversation on all 3 of these points in some way, but it's probably just not hitting the threshold that they need to warrant making a wild change. It's also probably like less popular and powerful than it was last patch, and so like they did talk about like Neptulon and Illuminate last patch. Like Aleko, I think, talked on Twitter about that. But if they didn't do it then we weren't probably going to get it this time either. So I get the frustration with Big Priest. Like, I don't think it's very fun. Like, I'd probably change it if I had my way. But I just don't think it's something that they're interested in doing, because it doesn't fit their kind of very, very high standards. No pun intended, they do for wild changes. So yeah, I don't know. I never expected them to do this. And then as for Quest Mage is mostly just like not a population concern. And so if it's not popular, they're probably just never going to touch it in wild anyway. So like, yeah, that's the big thing about Quest Mage.
Yeah, I think that the 2 biggest parameters for what gets nerfed tend to be play pattern and population. I think Big Priest is definitely pushing the population a lot more. Both are probably about equal in terms of play pattern, and honestly probably about equal in terms of strength, which is maybe like holding back some of their population, especially in the form of Quest Mage, because Big Priest is going to be Big Priestine no matter what. I think some of the issues that people have with it are in part based on what we just talked about, right? People are playing greedy Renathal decks that kind of get farmed by Big Priest. So like if they're playing those decks, and I've been guilty of this as well, it just feels so helpless when even if they get it on like turn 4 or 5, the Neptulon coming down, if you're not clearing that, or even if you do, like you're not winning that game of Hearthstone not even necessarily if they high roll. So like, I think it in part is the decks that people are playing, or the way that the metagame has shaped out has kind of opened up at least a bit of a window for Big Priest, whereas in the past, like some of those from hand combo decks that are now being stifled by Theotar are not able to do so as effectively. So Big Priest has a little bit more rain. People aren't playing hyper aggro because people have 40 health in Renathal. And so like there's an opening for Big Priest is really what it comes down to. It's not a top tier like superpower, but like it has that opening against some of those decks that are performing well, and so is probably like at a higher population than it used to be when it was just like an absolute dumpster fire before Illuminate and Neptulon were part of the deck. So yeah, I'm with you. I'd like both decks changed. The thing that always gets me, and I feel like we talk about this every single time, is like you can be annoyed, frustrated, disappointed that they didn't make wild specific changes, but you should not be surprised. They told us that these were explicitly standard balance changes. If you were expecting wild specific cards to get nerfed with this patch, like you weren't paying attention both to like recent history as well as to the words that it literally came out of their mouth. When they talk about nerfing wild cards, they make a point to separate that and, you know, make that announcement ahead of time. Like, I'm looking at Oleko's tweet announcing the balance changes, and like it explicitly says that we're doing standard balance changes. And so like it feels like we go through this every single time there's a patch. Even a Battlegrounds patch can come through and people are like, well, why didn't they nerf Quest Mage? Like, that literally happened when they did the Battleground season adjustment. People are like, oh, sweet, they're going to be changing Quest Mage and Big Priest in this patch. And I'm like, why would you expect that? Like, so I feel like a lot of times people's expectations get really out of whack within, you know, the very engaged wild population, I guess I would say. But like, if you're that engaged, you would know that these weren't going to be wild specific changes. Like, again, I'm disappointed. I would have liked both of those to be nerfed, but like, going in, I was just expecting largely a Guff change, to be honest, which is effectively what we got, which I think is, you know, a good thing for the format. So like, I'm just going to take that. I don't know. That's my stance on that.
Yeah, I always tell people, like in my Twitch chat, you should never expect changes and then just be happy when there are, right? Like, don't get your hopes up, because the bar for wild standard, or the bar for wild changes, is much higher than it is for standard changes, right? And it's very
it always
obvious. Yeah, good.
It always has been.
Yeah,
like,
I agree, and it's very obvious when that bar, I think, is being surpassed, right? That being said, I'm in the same boat as all of you guys that are listening. I would be okay with a Big Priest nerf. I would love a Quest Mage nerf, right? And things like that. But
it's funny though, Viap. No matter how many times you say that, if you say like, guys, they weren't gonna nerf Big Priest, people in the comments and stuff will be like, I can't believe you're defending Big Priest. No matter how many times you have to say the words, I would change it. I would do it.
If I see those comments in the YouTube comments, I'm gonna just delete them. That's what I'm gonna start doing.
Yeah.
To be clear, I think we might be at that threshold for Big Priest. I feel like maybe it's just my time in the Diamond 5 to 1 ban, but like, I feel like it's close, or at least it was close during the Big Rogue era as well. So I can understand why people thought maybe those would both happen simultaneously. But like, I feel like we're toeing the line with each of these. So like, I understand people's concern. It's just like the timing of it was very clearly not going to happen now.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's very much. This reminds me a lot of like the Barnes change, right? Where like the power level was like toeing the line, and the population was like toeing the line, and they were like kept being super hesitant on it. But I think eventually they're gonna cave to kind of like public perception and outcry, and I think eventually we will get one. I think it is a matter of time until we get one, but I don't disagree with you that like Corb talked about and outlined all this. Like, I understand why they could, right? Like, it's getting close. They have a really high bar, and sometimes we've been better for their very high bar. I feel like, again, I'm not defending Big Priest. I'm not defending Quest Mage and things like that. I'm being clear with this. If I see comments, I will delete them. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure Corb goes into this much more detailed in his videos. So
not really. Yeah. I didn't talk about it that much. I mean, I kind of just outlined the
no.
thing,
You gotta drive people to your video, Corb. You're doing the content creation thing wrong. Come on.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah.
You got the thumbnail down perfect, and now you're like not
now you're
driving people
backtracking.
towards
Come on.
video. You gotta stick with it. Go all in.
Sorry, I'm still learning. As for I do want to emphasize though the like the towing the line thing. It's just like the Big Priest is weaker than it was in the Big Rogue era, and so the fact that they just didn't do it, like I thought there was like a 1% chance they would do it. Like, my expectations were just, it's not happening. Like, it's straight up not happening. Just because of everything. So I don't know. Like, the Essence plays are so gross, man. Like, you win like 90% of the games if you illuminate into Essence, like literally 90%, and that's stupid. It just doesn't happen enough, and so like, I don't know. Like, I get why people are pissed. I get it. It's just, you know, we know this wasn't gonna happen. I knew it was gonna happen. I kept telling people in my chat it was gonna happen. I don't know why. Whatever. I don't know why people are disappointed. Or
no, I know
frustrated.
that's like that was the point I was trying to make too. I think that the problem though is that like that line has always been subjective, right? And so like it's hard to tell when we've approached that line, because like for you know, for somebody playing at my rank band, yeah, that line has been crossed. Like we're well past it. Like let's do something. So like, and you know, a lot more people play at that rank band than at High Legend. So it's understandable that like a lot of people would be of that mindset. So like, we don't know where the line is. We just have like a general idea based on previous decks, and like it's very blurry. So yeah, we don't know.
That being said, I kind of related to this. We talked about like I mentioned earlier, but like how I wish they had added like a snippet related to the like the Theotar thing in the actual like patch notes. I think what they've done in Magic when they do bannings and things like that is they give like an update on other formats, and it's like these are the things we're keeping an eye on. We didn't touch anything this time around, but these are the things that are like we're aware of these things, right? And I would love if they could do that for Wild in these patch notes. And I don't know how much that's asking. I don't know all of the work that goes into like to all of this. I know I was learning a little bit about this from deck text replies to other people, but like I know a lot of work has to go into these to standardize them and things like that. I would love to just have more dev comments on the Wild format as like, okay, we know that Big Priest is something that you guys are wanting changed. Here's why we're not changing it. Here's the reason why, sort of thing. And just so that like we don't get people constantly like there's not that constant outcry. I feel like of like, oh, the devs don't care about Wild. They don't know that Big Priest is a thing. Like, just give us the comments. Like, how much work would that be just to give that kind of information?
I mean, firstly, I don't think it would actually like curb any outrage. Like if they said, yeah, we're not nerfing Big Priest because of this, it would just be like, oh my god, the devs don't know because this, and that. Like I don't know if that would actually help very much. And as for the work, like, yeah, they probably have to, like, they already do all these dev comments, right, on all these other cards, and then that has to get all approved and translated. I don't know, probably has to go through like 18 people before they actually get the dev comment on the page. Like, I don't know, like,
yeah,
how much work there is. And so I kind of get it, why Aleko is able to, you know, kind of talk about it, you know, on his personal Twitter, probably a little bit more freely, and like closer to the date as well, compared to, you know, getting everything through and approved beforehand.
Yeah, as someone who used to write and edit release notes for a software company much smaller than Blizzard, it's not a matter of just like you write thing and then publish thing. Like, especially when thing is released in so many different languages that are outside of your hands, you write thing, submit thing, make changes to thing, submit thing again, make changes to thing again, send it off for you know, translation in however many languages. Like there's a lot of languages this has to be published in, and then you submit it for like design to be formatted properly and everything. But like there's steps to this. It's not just like deck tech writing it out, posting it online when it's done, and hey, we're good. Oof. Like yeah, like contrary to popular belief, there are languages outside of the English language that people engage with Hearthstone in, and there are actually quite a lot of them. And so these things take time. Like that's not even likely a Blizzard thing. You outsource that because you don't have somebody that speaks every single language, like and English on your staff. That like, you know. And so there's effort. It takes time.
Yeah. All right. Regardless, that being said, just my personal bias, I would love to see it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so the trade-off for that is something that the deck tech talked about. Like, it's either fewer changes or more time, like to publish. Like, there's a reason the patch notes came the same day as the patch, because that's like a 1 week turnaround. You have two changes. Do you want the patch notes early? Okay, we can get the patch notes early, but then the patch is coming later. So then you have more information you have more days between the patch and the patch notes. Or you could patch less often, and like then you're just getting fewer changes, which like people complained about that as well. Or like you hurry through the patch notes and hope and get them done and hope that you can, you know, release the content on a similar schedule to, or like at the time that the patch notes are going. So like it especially with the holiday like this week, it kind of threw things off a little bit in terms of getting the content to people.
Yeah, Roffle, just let me selfishly want another paragraph or two. Okay, stop with the login.
Honestly,
okay? Stop.
I'll tell you this: another paragraph or two isn't really going to take that much time in terms of like it would take time and approval, because like things like the dev comments, I'm sure that they don't want to let slip too much information that would be damaging for them, and then like translation time, like it's just another paragraph to translate.
Yeah. All right. Regardless, though, that's our recap of the brand new patch. Again, we are recording this on Saturday. The patch came out on Friday, so these are our very early impressions of the patch. We haven't played with it too much, so all of you guys that are jamming games over the weekend, let us know down in the comments your impressions about the changes, whether you're really mad that they didn't touch Theotar, that you're really mad they didn't touch Big Priest, and you can tag Corb in those on his video, because like I said, I'm gonna, if you flame me for backing Big Priest, you're getting deleted. All right. That being said, hopefully the patch is put in Wild in a decent spot. Like we mentioned earlier, kind of the nerf to Guff is the big one to keep an eye on, and the effects that has.
Meowth.
What?
Meowth, we got one more thing.
What?
Brawlseum. Brawlseum coming out on Wednesday. Oh, we got to talk about that.
Tuesday. Wednesday.
Whatever, time zones. You guys.
14th of September is when it's coming out. That's right. Wild Brawlseum. We talked about this 3 weeks ago, I believe. It's the big entry fee, but it's kind of like your Wild Open for the year. This is the one competitive thing that we got for Wild. Jam some Wild games, or probably more likely what you should be doing is just watching Wild streamers waste their money on this, and farming free wins on ladder while all the good players are playing the Brawlseum. That's what you probably should be doing. But that being said, I know I'm going to be posting some stuff about the Brawlseum. I know Corby talked about it as well. I know Roffle's probably going to be playing a ton of it on stream with and probably posting some YouTube highlights with decks that he plays in the Brawlseum. So make sure you guys check out all of our YouTube channels for content related to that. And I guess perfect segue to selling out. Roffle and Corb, where can people watch you play in the Brawlseum and watch some of that content?
Yeah, first of all, don't play the Brawlseum yourself unless you have a surplus of gold. Do not spend runestones or your real money on the Brawlseum. But if you want to watch me play it, I've got a surplus of gold, so like I'm happy to drop a 1,000 gold or whatever it is, and I've had historically good results. But you can find me on Twitch and YouTube at Roffle, and if I manage to have some successful runs, you might see me post the deck lists on Twitter at RoffleHS.
And you can always find me at Corbett on Twitch and Corbettgames on Twitter and YouTube. I'm looking forward to getting 0-3 to Illuminate into Essence 3 times in a row after everything that I've said so far. So if you want to check that out, come do so.
And then immediately post a new YouTube video about this is why they should nerf Big Priest. And then, boom, easy content.
Boom, the content just farms itself. It's incredible.
Content machine. You guys can find me at Get Me Up on all those platforms as well. Appreciate all of you guys that listen all the way to the end. You guys are the real ones. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys again next week. Later.